Warning: the Hayes Nation may stimulate personal growth and prosperity. Participation is strongly advised.
Well, today on the show, we are going to be talking about trading your time and labor for money. And then later, we're going to talk about success. It is not an entitlement, it's earned. All that and more, and it starts right now. All right, I'm your host, George Hayes, and welcome to the George Hayes Radio Podcast. I'm so excited to have you here today. I hope you're having a blessed day wherever you are. We're broadcasting from the Bama One podcast studio in the great state of Alabama. And I might add, it's a little chilly here today. Not as bad as the Northeast, but we're down in the teens and the 20s. So we're feeling it. It's wintertime. So today we're going to be talking about trading your time and your labor for money. And I don't think a lot of people think about it in those terms, but I want to explain it to you and have a conversation about it because it's very important that you understand this dynamic in our economy and how it works, right? And then later, we're going to talk about success is not being an entitlement, but it is something you earn. Now, if you want to reach out to me, it's GeorgeHayes@USA.com, GeorgeHayes@USA.com. I want to hear your stories. If you're on the road to faith, freedom, and prosperity, I want to hear your story. Tell me how it's going. Tell me what you're doing. How is it working for you? And conversely, look, if you're struggling or you want to be on this path, send me your comments as well. And do me a favor, when you do, give me a couple of lines about like what you're doing or what you think you should be doing to try to get yourself on track. Okay. And then, of course, comments, you can leave them on YouTube. And that's the George Hayes Radio Podcast on YouTube, the George Hayes Radio Podcast. If you want to follow me on social media, only one place. I'm on X, and that's RealGeorgeHayes on X. And finally, last but not least, most importantly, please go to HayesNation.com. Become part of the Hayes Nation. This is a place where like-minded people, just like you and me, who believe in faith, freedom, and prosperity, come together. We can have discussions, help each other, lift each other up. There are all kinds of tools and support that I post up there all the time. All the episodes are there. And if you're listening to us on podcast, we are on most podcast platforms. We're working on getting on everyone we can, but we're getting there. Okay. Excuse me. That was a mouthful. So let's just dive right in here. Segment 1. And by the way, this is episode 7. We're still building a base. Right now, we're not diving too deep into topics, but we're just kind of covering the surface and talking about things that I believe the audience should know if you're going to live a life in God's provision, which, hopefully for you is a life of prosperity. Now, let's talk about today about trading your time and labor for money, because that is what we do. When we get up in the morning and we go to work, we trade our time and our labor for money. And it is very crucial to have skills that employers want. I can't overstate this, because there's a lot of people that will say, well, I'm worth $20 an hour. I'm worth 25. I'm worth 40. I'm worth 50. I'm worth this. I'm worth that, right? But here's the truth. Are you? I'm asking you, are you really worth that? And I can tell you the answer to how you know if you are or you are not. And it's very simple. You're worth what the market is willing to pay for your skills. That's the bottom line. You might feel like you're worth this. You could say, well, I don't get up in the morning for less than this, and that's fine. But if there's nobody willing to pay what you're asking, then you don't have the assets that is needed to get those companies to pay you that type of money. And now, although today I am focusing on being an employee, I'm talking about employees, people who work for someone, work for a paycheck, people who run businesses, they have similar issues, right? I mean, they trade their time and labor for money, but they have to do things like keep clients happy. They have to, get those customers to keep coming back, and it requires similar disciplines. But for today, let's just focus on those of you who are earning a paycheck. Now, I personally believe that in America, freedom comes from pursuing prosperity through skills and planning. I cannot overstate that. And all of it's guided by faith in God's provision and your hard work. Now, in my own life, I can tell you right now, I worked in the telecommunications industry. I started off as a cable TV installer many, many moons ago. We don't need to go back that far, but it was a very, very long time ago. But what I did was I took the initiative. It took me a while to get there. It's not a perfect journey. I spent a lot of time in my, late teens and early 20s kind of meandering through, trying to figure out what I wanted. But I had found an industry that I liked, and I felt like I could do well in it. And over time, I figured it out. And I did the right things. I took classes. I got certificates. I went to all kinds of training. I got licenses and credentials. And I adapted throughout my entire career. And that planning finally got me to the point where I reached the highest level I reached was vice president. And I was a vice president of operations of a very, very large region and responsible for multi-million-dollar budgets. And then eventually I went out on my own, started my own company, and I was able to walk away from it by age 58. And that's because I learned how to save, I learned how to invest, and I took my time, I went through the process, and I got there. Now, let's just talk about this whole thing about trading time and labor, okay? Because this is what we do. And if we're going to, and let me just make this statement here real quick. This is not going to change anytime soon, okay? So, I know there's promises out there of universal incomes and things like that. The issue I have with universal incomes is that you become beholden to the master, which is the government, and you're going to live fixed by whatever it is that they're going to drop on you, and that is it. There is no building beyond that. You're going to live within the means of whatever you are given. And success is not given, it's earned. And we're going to talk about that in the next segment. I also want to talk about career stagnation or stalling or whatever you want to call it. I climbed the ladder because I didn't stay in one place. I found that every 2 to 3 years, 5 at the most. Honestly, I think I stayed at one company for about 7 years. That was the longest stint for me. But by moving every couple of years, I was able to increase my pay by anywhere from 15 to 20%. I even think I did a 30% jump one time, which was great. But every step of the way, every couple of years, I would learn everything I could. I would take the classes, the training. I would do whatever I had to do to get to the next level. And if I couldn't get there in the company I was in, I left that company and went outside shopping to find a company who would pay me what I was worth in what value I brought to the table. So, and why is this? Why is it that you can't, stay with a company for 20 years and really make any giant leaps in pay? And that is because companies use what's known as wage suppression. Okay? They create things like pay grade levels, job descriptions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then they use terms like parity, which I'll get to here in just a second. And let me give you an example of what that looks like. So in telecommunications, you could have Tech 1, Tech 2, Tech 3. Okay, those are classifications. And then you would have a pay grade attached to Tech 1, Tech 2, Tech 3. So let's just say Tech 1, and I'm making numbers up here, okay? Tech 1 is $15 an hour to $20 an hour. Tech 2 is $20 to $25 an hour. Tech 3 is $25 to $30 an hour, okay? And if you are with a company, let's just say you're with them and maybe you go through all three grades, if you were, say, quote unquote, a technician, then you would eventually reach a cap. And companies, they use parity, as I mentioned. And what parity means is that they try to keep things all equal within those subgroups of employees. And it doesn't matter whether you're working in a big institution or a smaller institution. Most companies use this. They've adopted this. This is how HR departments look at it. And what they don't want to do when they say parity is they don't want to create problems. So let's just say in my example, you have a Tech 1 who's making $18 an hour. And you have another Tech 1 that's making $25 an hour, which technically would have been in the next classification of a Tech 2. And that would upset people. But if we moved him to a Tech 2 and then slowly moved his rate up, there would be less arguments because, hey, you're a Tech 1 and he's a Tech 2. And they can control the growth rate of employees' salaries through using this type of method. Now, generally speaking, parity is usually used and as a general rule for incumbents, meaning people who have been there and you're already working for the company. And many of you may have witnessed this. You've been with the company for 3-4 years and there's a big job opening and you apply for it, but you don't get it. They end up bringing somebody from the outside. It's rare that you see a giant leap forward inside. Somebody that's been there for a couple of years is not going to make this giant leap where it's a 30-40% increase in pay up to a higher position. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but it's rare. Okay? Now, when they bring in a recruit from the outside, okay, the parity rule doesn't always necessarily apply because they can break their own rule for new hires. And what they'll do is they'll point to, say, changing market conditions. That's a valid reason to pay someone from the outside more than what they are paying you. This is just how it works. You might be qualified, but they like where you're at, and they don't want to rock the apple cart, and a position has been vacated, and rather than to promote somebody from within, they will often go to the outside, and they're willing to pay that person 15 to 20% more than what they're paying on the inside. And does this rock the parity bubble? Does it cause problems? Sometimes it does, but most times it doesn't, because it's easily sold off and people will accept it. Now, let me tell you why the 2 to 3 year rule in changing jobs is important. Because again, we're talking about trading our time and our labor, okay, for a paycheck. And we're constantly wanting to build value in ourselves. You can't expect to just, you get the job and then you just do the same job over and over and over and expect it to grow. You can't expect that. You have to put something into yourself. You have to constantly be making yourself more valuable. Again, you can say, well, I'm worth it, I deserve it. You can say all those things, but when you work for a company, many times that argument's not going to hold water with them. They're going to want to follow their rules. Again, for parity's sake, it helps lessen lawsuits, keeps them out of trouble. Now, here's what happens, okay? Usually when you work for a company, your skills plateau around year 2, okay? Somewhere by about year 2, you've learned all the systems, you've delivered measurable results, your marginal learning skills kind of slow because you're doing the same thing over and over. And if the pay doesn't accelerate after that, you're essentially donating value to the company. Especially if you've added value. You've learned everything. You know the systems inside and out. But as long as you're willing to stay, the company has achieved its goals, and you're basically donating value at the price that they want to pay. Okay? And let me tell you this right now. Raises rarely beat market adjustments. Now, market adjustments are happening all the time. But if you're head down, and which is good, you're going to work, you're on time, you're a good employee, you're educating yourself, you're doing all the things to make yourself more valuable. But if you're not paying attention, the outside market is changing, whether you're watching it or not. So internally, raises typically fall somewhere in the 3 to 5% annually, okay? And so if you're making a plan for your future over the next 20 years, if you stay with one company, you could easily do the math. You could say 3 to 5% increases, maybe average it out. You say, okay, I'm hoping I can get 4%. And then you can calculate what 4% looks like over the next 10 years to see where you'll be at. But here's where it gets interesting. If you make moves, say every 2 to 3 years, okay, you can see external moves that are anywhere from 10 to 25% increases. And depends on what field you're in. If you're in a really hot field, you could see a gigantic increase simply by switching companies. Look, the math always wins, and I'm telling you, loyalty loses. Now, I personally don't believe that companies have loyalty to the employees to the tune where they're willing to give you what you want to keep you there. Are there exceptions to the rule? Yes. But they are far and few between. Okay? Now, there are some exceptions to this rule. So I want to make sure that I point this out. Some of the exceptions are, that would make sense to stay longer with a company is you're getting real promotions, real title with the pay, and it's significant. If you're working for a company that's willing to do that, that might be a reason to stay. Or maybe you're gaining some kind of equity or ownership in the company. Another thing is if you're in a family business or maybe a partnership. I will say this about unions, okay? If you're in a union, like a trade union, and it has a good step increase policy, that might be a reason to stay. And finally, the company is actively re-benchmarking your pay to the market. Now that one there, there's very few companies that do that, but if you're working for a company that actually goes out and looks at the market and says, hey, we're giving everybody raises because that's what the market's paying, you're working for a great company, do the math, see if it works over the next 5, 10, 15 years. That would be a smart move, but those are pretty far and few between. And like I said, if none of these are happening, you're basically subsidizing whatever company or organization you work with underpaid experience. And just let me add this to you, okay? Just let me add this here, okay? Proverbs 14:8 says that the wisdom of the prudent is to discern his way. You need to be prudent in these matters. Your time and your labor is worth something, especially if you're educating yourself, especially if you're doing the things that make you more valuable. And if you can't get it at the company that you're at, then it's time to shop to see if you can get it somewhere else. Now, in today's economy, staying 2 to 4 years at a company isn't disloyal. It's responsible. If your pay isn't growing at the same pace as your skills and the market, you don't owe anyone stagnation. Let me repeat that. Make sure you understand that. If you stay at a company, or staying at a company, it's not disloyal to leave, okay? It's your responsibility to leave, especially if your pay isn't growing. If your pay's not growing with the market, why would you stay there? Now, I will say this. Markets reward movement. Companies reward compliance, okay? And if you're happy with 3 to 5% and an occasional bonus, and if that's your version of prosperity, who am I to argue with that? I'm not telling everybody to go out and quit their jobs or go find another job or anything like that. I'm just telling you these are basic economic facts. Okay? And this isn't about greed. Okay? This is about stewardship. Being a good steward of your finances. You are responsible for managing your time, your talents, and your earning power, and you should do it wisely. Blind loyalty to a payroll system is not a virtue. Now, on our show, our goal is building wealth. And the purpose of trading our time and our labor is to try to build something, okay? And one of those things is retirement, right? None of us want to work until we're 65 or 70, or we can't even stop working. I mean, a lot of people want to work when they're 65, and a lot of people want to work when they're 70, but a lot of them do it because they want to, not because they have to. And that is the difference. You know, and some people want retirement sooner rather than later. It just depends on how aggressive you are to follow a real plan. And again, and I keep saying plan, I'm talking about actually doing the math. If you have a computer, break out Excel and take a look at what your earnings are with raises over the next 10 years. And you can get a total to figure out how much money you will make over the next 10 years at your current wages with 3 to 5% increases. Like I said, maybe use 4 as an average, okay? And see where you are at the end of the 10 years and see if that makes sense to you. But it's a real plan. I mean, you literally have to write this stuff down. And if it doesn't, then what are you going to do? What moves do you have to make to change that? Okay? Now, I want to add a small, little tiny note here, a little caveat. It's not off topic, but it's important. We trade our time and our labor for money. And let's say we're doing it right. We're educating ourselves. We're doing all the things that we need to do to make our lives better. Okay? We're becoming disciplined and saving and all this other stuff. Do not let lifestyle creep in to your plans. It will destroy your plans. And for those of that you who don't understand lifestyle creep, let me explain it to you this way. Over the years, I've seen this happen to many people. And my best example is this. In my old trade, we would have these very skilled technical people who would go out and start their own contracting company. And contracting in telecommunications can be lucrative if it's done correctly. So they go out, they get their contractor's license, they start a company, they get a contract. Pretty soon, they're making more money than they've ever made. But they're not used to managing those types of finances. And the first thing that happens is you see them buy this gigantic house, this massive house. Then comes the cars, the boat, the camper, and the list goes on, okay? That's lifestyle creep. And it happens to people who are on payroll, those of us who work for an employer. You work for an employer, and you get the 3 to 5% raise. Let's just say you're at the top end. You get the 5% raise, and what are you doing? Well, we're putting in a swimming pool. There goes the raise. It's gone. That's lifestyle creep. It's important to try to live at a lifestyle that's comfortable, and anything additional that comes in goes to savings and investing. So I just want to throw that in because I think it is part of this discussion. And, you know, when we're talking about trading our time and labor for money, let's not waste it by allowing our lifestyles to follow the money sooner rather than waiting. Because remember, building wealth is about building for the future, for our families. Okay, being good stewards to make sure that we're providing for our families. Okay, now, skills in adapting will get you paid more. But to stop trading time and labor for money, I want to talk about saving and building wealth just for a second here. Especially for retirement or, whatever, that empire that you're building where you want, mailbox money. You want checks to rain in the mail. Okay. You have to start somewhere. And again, if we're talking about incremental moves upward, and we're doing that through constant training of ourselves, getting the things that we need to make more money. We're, every couple of years, we're shopping the market. We're trying to move up, right? We need to do some simple things that also complement building wealth. And what are those? Well, I want you to start small, okay? Aim for 15% of income annually to start building security. And you need to start doing this now. The sooner, the better. Don't wait until you're 45 years old to start this. The younger you are, and I hope that the audience that is watching this, especially those of you that are in your 20s, I cannot emphasize how important it is for you to aim for 15% of your income being put away. Start by saving and then learn how to invest. Now, investing for passive income, okay? We want to make moves like the 401ks, IRAs, real estate. Right now in the U.S., the total retirement assets as of Q3 and I think 2025 is somewhere around $48 trillion. So people are doing it. There's a lot of retirement building and a lot of wealth building going out there to the tune of $48 trillion. You want to be part of that crowd. Now, let me just throw the faith angle in here, okay? Stewardship honors God's blessings, turning labor into lasting abundance. But it's when you do it for your family's sake, okay? If you're just doing it for your own lavish lifestyle and you want to blow money and party and do all of that stuff, that's not the God's plan that I am talking about, okay? Real stewardship, and if you want God's blessing, means that you need to be generous and you need to help His church. However you do it, the church you attend to, whatever group you're involved with, maybe you like a particular ministry, or you want to sponsor people who are going out and getting the word of the Lord out there. However it is, we need to be good stewards with our money. Now, again, I'm talking to employees here, but I feel like I just should mention this. If you're trying to build a business empire, okay, so for you business owners, you have to reinvest your profits wisely. And adaptability is huge. It means you need to be able to pivot to trends, whatever they are, tech integration, whatever it takes for client satisfaction and growth. Now, if you want retirement or checks in the mail, consistent saving and investing can lead to passive income like dividends or rental income, that frees you up from the daily grind. Now, we talk about savings, okay? If you are saving and investing, remember I said 15% of your income, and you start at age 25, you could build yourself one heck of a comfortable retirement. That's why I say you have to start sooner rather than later. Trading time for money is the start. But skills, adapting to changing markets, saving and investing, that's what leads to true freedom and prosperity, guided by faith in the path that's been laid out in front of you. And you must be motivated, okay? Access your skills today, adapt, make a plan, and start to build your wealth. God has given us the tools to do it. It's up to us to use them. Now, look, I want to know what your take is on this. Okay, where are you in understanding what your time and labor is worth? Are you making plans? Are you actually looking at how long you can stay at one company before you need to change? If you're stagnant for too long, it's not going to work. You got to have a plan. I want you to email me at georgehayes@usa.com or leave comments for me on this particular topic on YouTube at the George Hayes Radio Podcast. I am your host, George Hayes, and I will be right back.
You're listening to the George Hayes Radio Podcast.
Can I ask you a question? What is stopping you from taking the next step? Whether building a business, chasing a dream, or even setting a small goal, you just have to reach out and grab it. Similarly, success isn't just about the work we put in. It's about the people we surround ourselves with. That's why I am so proud of the community that we are building at HayesNation.com. This is a space where dreamers, doers, and go-getters come together to share ideas, support each other, and grow. If you're not already a part of the Hayes Nation, what are you waiting for? Go to HayesNation.com, connect with like-minded people who believe in faith, freedom, and prosperity, and let's make success a team effort. And finally, let me close with this. Every great journey starts with action. I know you can do it. You know you can do it. So now it's time to take that next step.
Hayes. The George Hayes Radio Podcast is on. Become a regular member of the Hayes Nation by following us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. Support the show by subscribing and smash that like button now.
Welcome back to segment 2 of the George Hayes Radio Podcast. You can reach me at georgehayes@usa.com, georgehayes@usa.com. I want to hear your story, where you are on the path to building a life of faith, freedom, and prosperity. If you want to leave comments, it's YouTube at the George Hayes Radio Podcast. I'm only on one social media platform, and that is X, and that's Real George Hayes. But most importantly, go to HayesNation.com. That's where the place where people who believe in faith, freedom, and prosperity come together, share stories, support each other. There's all kinds of information. I'm constantly updating it with tools and things that you need to build a life of prosperity. So let's go ahead and let's just dive right in, okay? Success is not an entitlement. It's earned, okay? Now, me personally, I wasn't entitled to reach the level of a vice president or own my own company. I earned it through paying attention to market conditions, lots of reading. You have to educate yourself. And if you don't have your nose in a book, if you don't have something that's current and, whether you're teaching yourself about faith, or if it's finances, or physical well-being, whatever it is, you should always be updating and reading and putting new, fresh data in your mind so that you can stay up with what's currently going on in the world. Now, I that's how I earned it, okay? I mean, I take it a step further. I believe you have to pay attention to market conditions. You can't just ignore what's going on in both, the employment market or even the financial markets. You have to have an understanding of what's going on in the world in order to make course corrections. And that's what I did. And look, I did, besides doing a lot of reading, I took all kinds of classes. I got licenses, certifications, credentials, but most importantly, it was through faith and determination that I was able to get to the point where I was able to walk away from trading my time and labor for money. So, prosperity, and let me just say it like this. Prosperity through hard work aligns with God's gift of free will. Okay? And American liberty allows us to rise on merit. And you couple that with a faith in purposeful effort. Does that make sense? We all are here. We have purpose. God wants us to be here, and we have to put in the effort to achieve our goals. Now, from my 40 years of climbing the ladder, however you want to look at it, I saw folks lose everything over and over again because they thought that success was owed to them, or they let lifestyle creep spend all their money. And I touched on that in the first segment a little bit. Lifestyle creep is a dangerous thing. As you progress, as you get older, as you build value in yourself, you've got to be careful and mindful to not just blow it as fast as you earn it. Now, this is why having skills, value, whatever you want to call it, gives you the ability to flip that script. And when I say flip the script, I'm talking about going from trading time and labor for money to making the money work for you. We start off working for a paycheck, but the ultimate goal is to build wealth for your loved ones by making money work for you. When you build a prosperous life, and it's not just money, but spirituality, health, physical well-being, it's giving you the ability to be a blessing to others. It's not about becoming a millionaire. It's about stewardship of your time, purpose, and your soul. Now, here's why success isn't entitled. The entitlement mindset, it ignores reality. Success demands action, not assumptions. And in America, freedom means earning through ability. It's not a birthright or luck. We all start at the same place, but where we finish is up to the individual. And that's really important to understand. We just don't all start at the same place. But, there are countless stories. I mean, there are so many millionaires that are self-made in this country because they weren't constricted by outside influences, our culture, whatever you want to call it. They were focused and determined to make their way. Now, we use hard work as the foundation, but in today's world, we need to do a little bit more. And, if I was planning to go to college, for whatever degree, I would be asking questions like, what type of pay and growth will that give me for my future? This is, one of my biggest pet peeves is that, I believe that the education system does a huge disservice here by just having the blanket statement that everybody should get a college degree. Well, college degree in what? And how does it apply to the market and the world around us? And, look, if what you're currently doing isn't paying off, right? What course correction do I make to get back on track? If you went to college and you got a degree and you just can't find a job, what can you do? There's got to be something in there that you can salvage, that you can add some additional credentials to get yourself into a market that you can make a change for the better. Now listen, God blesses us with diligence, as in Proverbs 14:23. All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. So you can talk about it all you want, but hard work brings the profit. Now, our culture, well, it's a culture that pushes entitlement, which breeds complacency. Now, I personally was going to night school while working full time. Look, I was taking every training course and certification program I could find out there. Anything I could lay my hands on to further my career. This is why success is earned. And here's the thing, when you take this approach, it builds character and lasting wealth. So you really have to look at the big picture. And, again, I talk about planning a lot, but see, I can't do the planning for you. I can give you these basic concepts, but, this isn't the George Hayes How to Get Rich radio podcast. That's not what this is. I don't have a formula for you because we're all individuals. And I have no idea with whoever's watching what your desires are, what your plans, what your dreams are. But you know what they are. And are you willing to make changes so that you can put your life on a trajectory that will build a life of prosperity? Now, planning and strategy, okay? It is required, okay? And this is interesting, okay? Without it, even talent can fail, okay? Even without it, talent can fail. And I'll give you an example. 70% of businesses, they flop. They don't make it. And it's mainly because of poor planning. The same thing applies to the individual. You might have talent, but if you don't plan on how to use that talent, how to get people to know you have that talent, how to sell that talent, there's a good possibility of failure. And we want to try to avoid that. Now, the great thing about the United States is the Constitution guarantees the pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. But it doesn't guarantee success. At least I've never read it in there where it guarantees life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, and success. It doesn't say that. And we have free will. God gives us free will. And our Constitution gives us freedom to move about and to do what we want with our lives. And we must take advantage of that. Now, here are some of what I think the pitfalls are of entitlement thinking, okay? And I boiled it down to 3. There's quite a few more, but just let's stick with these 3 for now. The first thing is it leads to debt. That's the first thing that happens. The second thing it leads to is resentment. And then lastly, it leads to missed opportunities. Because if you're dwelling on this whole idea that, well, I'm entitled to, a living wage, I'm entitled to a universal income, I'm entitled to this, I'm entitled to that. And I'm not talking about or disparaging people who are on disability or some of the entitlement programs that we have for people who truly need them. I'm talking about able-bodied people who can work, are able to work, and don't. But in their mind, they believe that they're entitled to something. And it just simply leads to these things. Now, according to a 2025 BLS data study, well, actually, it wasn't a study. It's just basic BLS data. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, in case you don't know what BLS is. Job markets last year, in 2025, saw 6 million positions left unfilled due to skills gaps. There was a skill gap where there are these needed skills that companies are craving for. They need these positions filled, and they couldn't fill them because people didn't have those skills. And that plays right into my narrative because we're not paying attention to what employers are looking for. So 6 million jobs just get left on the table. That's not good. That's opportunity. That's missed opportunity. So look at it this way. If success is earned, let's look at why that rings true in everyday life. Okay, from my own personal experience to the broader truths. Okay, over my career, I've interviewed thousands of candidates. And many of those who got the job, they earned promotions. They are always the folks that adapted by learning new skills. They were willing to change. And they are all doing very well for themselves. I keep in touch with a lot of people that I hired over the years. And they're all doing great. They were always the people you could count on. And they were always trying to better themselves. Now, conversely, those that thought they were entitled to promotions, they were lazy, they let someone else handle difficult tasks, or they were simply unwilling to improve themselves, were always the folks that struggled personally, financially, and eventually ended up out of a job. Playing the blame game gets you nowhere. We always have to look inward towards ourselves. What are we doing to better ourselves? And you look, in business, it's the same, okay? Satisfied clients come from earned trust, not demands. Any business owner knows this. They have got to earn that trust of their clients, and they have to do the thing to maintain their existing client base. Now, God, He doesn't entitle, He empowers. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard this, the parable of the talents. Okay, this is Matthew, verse 25, chapters 14 through 30. And this clearly shows reward for faithful effort. Prosperity blooms from stewardship, not expectation. So let me just go over it with you real quick, okay? Basically, in this parable, Jesus tells a story about a master who's leaving on a journey. Now, before he leaves, he entrusts his property to 3 servants. And one of the servants, he receives 5 talents. And talents is a unit of measure. And from best we could tell, it was quite a bit of money. It was a year's worth of wages, maybe more, okay? So one servant receives 5 talents. He gives a second servant 2 talents, and the third receives 1 talent. Now, they each received their talents according to their ability. Now, the servants with the 5 and the 2 talents, they immediately go to work and they put that money to work. They invest it and they double what they were given. The servant with the 1 talent did nothing. He buried the money out of fear and wanting to avoid risk. Now, when the master returns, he calls them to account. And the first 2 servants report growth. The master praises them And he uses the same words for both of them. He says, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. I will make you ruler over many things." Now the third servant returns only with what he was given, and he blames it on fear. The master calls him wicked and lazy, not for losing money, but for doing nothing. The unused talent is taken away and given to the one who produced more. So you can see having skills and being a good steward of your finances is clearly rewarded. And by the way, that's one of my favorite parables. I love that one. Now let's talk freedom in America, okay? Liberty means anyone can earn success regardless of where they start. It's a mindset. It's all up here. And if you're stuck right now and you have minimal skills and you're working a minimum level paying job and you're just not going anywhere, okay? It's up here where you need to change. It's the mindset. You don't blame the company. Don't blame everybody around you. Don't blame anyone. Start looking inward. Build your relationship with God. And then start to focus on what you can do to improve your future. Now, building wealth and being a good steward of your skills and finances is the earned way. This leads to retirement, passive income, or just simply a better life. And entitlement thinking, on the other hand, skips saving, having purpose, and being a blessing to others as God expects of us. Entitlement thinking is very selfish and it's very inward. And in my opinion, it is not godlike. It's not what God wants us to do. Now, interestingly enough, okay, a 2025 Gallup poll found determined workers are 2 times more likely to achieve financial goals. Now, to me, that's the American way. It's fueled by the freedom to chase your dreams. So people who are determined usually do well. Now, look, success isn't entitled. It's earned through hard work, faith-guided planning, and embracing freedom to adapt and grow. You got to learn how to tune out the noise. Grow your relationship with the Lord and build your path and ignore the world. Listen to God. So let me ask you this question. Are you really earning it daily? God's given us the tools. Use them for prosperity without sorrow. Don't blame yourself, enrich yourself. Don't point fingers at others. Do something about it. Ignore what's going on out there. If people are telling you, well, that's the best you're ever going to do, and you listen to that, that's terrible advice. You need to focus on you and building your value in yourself so that you can lead a prosperous life. Now, let me leave you with this, okay? Deuteronomy, this is chapter 8, verses 17 through 18, okay? You may say to yourself, my power and the strength of my hands have produced this wealth for me. But remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you the ability to produce wealth, and so confirms His covenant with us. Now, look, I want to hear what you have to say about this. I'm really interested in your story. So I want you to email me on this topic, georgehayes@usa.com. And you can entitle, your email subject line as, entitlement is not a success, or, hey, look, if you disagree with me, I want to hear from you too. Prove to me that you're entitled. You're entitled to success. I want you to prove to me that you are. I don't believe that this is a difficult subject. It shouldn't be controversial. Every year, new millionaires appear in the United States. Every year, more and more. Okay? Every year, people grow and enrich their lives. And some people are happy. They're on a nice, steady track, and they're doing their things that make them happy, and that makes them prosperous. But none of us are entitled to anything. Thanks for taking time and spending with me. I hope you have a blessed day wherever you are. And I want you to remember, okay, keep that train rolling down the track, because the light at the end of the tunnel, well, it just might be you. I'll see you next time.
It's time to smash that like button and subscribe. To share or leave comments, log on to YouTube at the George Hayes Radio Podcast, or visit us online at HayesNation.com.